Today's episode is sponsored by Permanent Hearing Damage, which is a recording studio based in Philadelphia, owned and operated by Steve Roche from Seisha, Offminer, Boer War, which you're hearing now, and many others. They've spent the last 25 years specializing in recording, mixing, mastering for punk, hardcore, metal, and related genres at artist-friendly prices. Some recent clients include Piers, Foxtails, Masanera, Closer, Rambo, Stinking Lizaveta, Sanagi, and Witching. Contact Permanent Hearing Damage via their website, permanenthearingdamage.com. Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you about our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine, where you can go to support the show and read zines, get music sneak peeks, and so much more. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing this song is sponsored by Absolute Vodka by Middle-Aged Queers, featuring my pal Shauners on vocals and keyboards. The song comes off their newest release, Theater of Shame, which you can find on Bandcamp now.
Probably from a classmate of mine. His name was Laird, and I went on to play in a band with Laird in high school. But he gave me a mixtape that had Dead Kennedys on it, Lard, so pretty Jello Biafra influenced. There were some smaller bands on it, or at least like smaller for that time. So I know there was an Operation Ivy song on it. AFI had their first 7-inch, which was a split, and it had the AFI side on it, but not I think it was Loose Change that was on the B side. It didn't have the Loose Change on it. It just had AFI. And then some radio recordings from a band called Screw 32, who later went on to be signed by Fat. But it was pretty localized to the Bay Area. And I remember being very into the Dead Kennedys. It was the Nazi Punks Fuck Off 7-inch. And then I can't really remember what was on that AFI record. I'm pretty sure that NyQuil was on it, which is like kind of a departure for them as far as their early stuff. It was an outlier, I should say, for their early stuff. It was a little bit slower, had a little bit more dynamics to it. So yeah, that was probably the first comp and first exposure. I was really into. So at the time that I got into punk rock, the Bay Area scene was very geared towards, it was coming out of the thrash metal era. Mm-hmm. So there was this weird thing happening with like thrash bands playing funk music or like doing slap bass.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the biggest that came out of that was like bands like
Infectious Grooves.
Infectious Grooves.
Yeah.
I would even say that Faith No More kind of came out of that.
Sure.
Definitely Mr. Bungle. Um, so my friend Laird kind of course corrected me. I still love a lot of that stuff, but there was an all ages venue in Berkeley, about maybe I want to say like a mile and a half away from Gilman Street. And so I would go see bands play there that were more on like the metal tip or like the alternative side of things. And eventually folks that I'd see at shows there were like, we're talking about going to shows at Gilman. And I eventually came over to shows at 924 Gilman just because there was such a influx of people that I would see at those shows encouraging me to go to shows over there.
Yeah.
I was pretty reluctant. I think I was going to those shows at the Berkeley Square when I was about 12. And I was really reluctant to go to Gilman because you had to get a membership card. And like, that seemed like way too much bureaucracy. And like, I don't know, it seemed like the older, cooler kids were going there. And I put off going there for a long time. And then eventually, punk shows would happen at Berkeley Square too. So I saw plenty of bands that would be playing at Gilman before I finally made it over to Gilman Street.
Yeah. Even, from like all the way across the country down in Florida, and we'd read about stuff in Gilman, in Maximum Rock and Roll and stuff. Everybody I knew was like, this is so weird. Like, what's this membership card all about? And like, everybody, like, we didn't understand it. We were just ignorant to like the reasons or whatever, and we were like, I'm not putting like this idea in your, like, not saying this is what you were thinking, but like everybody was like that I knew was like, that seems like we don't want a uniform, we don't want a membership, this sounds like a fucking yacht club. I mean, of course we couldn't have been further from the truth, but like, you know what I mean? That's like how it came across, like from the outside. And then like years later, we would go to like book a show there, and there was even like you do have to be a member to play a show, or you did at that time. And they're like, but it's like $1 and you're gonna get like, and we were like, oh, okay. And like, then we sort of get like, well, and this is why we do this. And like, it's like, oh, but like, yeah, I don't know. It was such a like a polarizing thing for some people, just because, you didn't know what it was about, or what the space was even necessarily about,
Yeah, it felt from the outside looking in, it felt kind of gatekeepy.
Right.
The membership card is gone now.
Is
so
it?
you are a member by being a person who comes to the shows and is involved in the community.
Cool.
So like, if you're a volunteer, you're a member. If you go to membership meetings, you're a member. But a lot of it back in the day was done for everything from reasons of, well, we can smoke inside if it's a membership club, or we don't have to let the cops in. And smoking went away ages ago. I can't even remember the last time I was at a show at Gilman where smoking was allowed, but that was overturned, thankfully, by the membership, because it got gross in there.
Oh, I bet.
That was very much like this 90s sort of 80s and 90s thing where, to skirt the laws, they kept that membership card thing. But yeah, I get the reasons why they had it in place, in hindsight, in retrospect. But to, 12-year-old preteen me wanting to go to a punk show was like, oh, they're gatekeeping things. And I'm definitely not going to be welcome there.
Yeah.
Like, and, I bought a membership card and it wasn't a big deal. Yeah. There wasn't a jury or a panel or anything.
Right.
I just paid the $2.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know what we were thinking, just what it looked like from the outside, where it's just like, this is like, you have to, like, what kind of place is this where it's like, there's like rules before you even walk in the door, and like, I mean, every place always had rules, but it just seemed, like you said, gatekeepy, but it's I still have never played there. We did not make that tour. Somebody ended up a drummer ended up bailing on the tour last minute. We got somebody else, but they could only go about halfway. So I still, to this day, have never played there. But
I'm still booking there.
yeah,
So, if we can make it work.
Yeah. I shouldn't say anything else on record, but we may be out in California next year, so maybe we'll make that happen. That'd be fantastic. I got to do ABC No Rio long time ago, and I got to do Chez Cafe in probably around like 2017 or something. So like I got my other ones, like I have to play these places, off of my USA list, but never Gilman. So
it's so funny when you get to those spots and you're like, it's so important that we play here, and then you're like, everybody there treats it the same way that I treat Gilman. Like, oh yeah, it'll be a good show tonight. Like I expect everyone to like treat it with the sort of like prestige that I give it. Like we played Chez Cafe, maybe like 3 years ago. And I remember just being like, oh, it's just like this coffee shop on campus. That's neat. Or like playing Vera in Seattle. I was like so hyped. And I love what they're doing at both of those places are great. But, like once you get there, you're like, oh yeah, this is like what we do at Gilman. Okay. Like, the people here who are like running the show feel probably the same way that I do about this space,
Yeah. It's like this space is important. We know what we're doing is like, important and gets people like, that are coming from out of, we know everybody's like pumped to come here because of like the legacy the place has and everything, but like, and we're going to do like a great job and have a great show. And this is important to us, but also this is like the third or fourth show we've done this week. So like, like it's like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I always feel really bad whenever it's like, a band really wants to come play Gilman on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I want to curb your enthusiasm just a little bit. Wednesdays during the school year are awful. And they're like, we don't care. That's the day that we can play the Bay Area. And we want to play Gilman. We don't care if we're playing to nobody. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Because you will be.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oftentimes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be one of those places where it's like, you get this certain idea in your head, like if you've not done this a bunch, like I understand at this point that like, yeah, you really like, you might be that 19-year-old kid at some point that's doing your first tour, and you just picture Gilman Street being filled to the brim every time, like it's like the most well-attended Op Ivy show that ever happened there, or whatever. But like, once you've done this a few times, you're like, look, the place is important. Its legacy is undeniable, but at the same time, it's a Wednesday show, and when we say there won't be people here, then there won't be people here. But yeah.
I mean, it still happens where like some of the older bands who have been around for a second. I've kind of been tasked with being like the old head liaison for Gilman.
Yeah.
So like lots and lots of bands moved up in the world and started playing bigger halls and bigger theaters, being on bigger tours. And they still want to, like, obviously like post-pandemic, crowd turnouts are not as great as they used to be. I feel like the demographic for a lot of punk rock is getting older. And so some of them are just kind of altering where they like the capacity of where they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to explain to them, like, hey, so the last time you played at Gilman was like, there were 300 people there. There won't be this time.
Mm-hmm.
For a multitude of reasons. We had Off With Their Heads maybe 6 months ago. And when I tried to explain that to them and be like, hey, so things are, and they're like, yeah, we just want to play DIY venues this time. We just want to do all ages. I'm like, oh, okay. So, they definitely were an outlier of like, no, we want to do this.
Yeah.
We're stoked to do this. And even though it was a Wednesday or whatever, like they still had an okay turnout, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like,
but yeah, the landscape is definitely changing.
for sure. I mean, you mentioned like, yeah, okay, we're older now, and like, you know, we all got like COPD and like asthma and all this from like, you know, having COVID once or 3 times or what, you know,
Yeah.
like everything's different. But yeah, you know, before we were recording, we started talking about, you know, I've been aware of like middle-aged queers and stuff like for, you know, a while and everything, but when we first started sort of chatting online, around that time was when I was doing a compilation for our friend Ellie, and they had some medical bills, and you were like, "Hey, my old band, The Cost, has this song that never got released. Like, do you want to throw that on this comp?" And we were like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome, right?" So, I did not actually know anything about The Cost at that time. Like, you know, it was just like, hey, we were doing these things like at the same time that all this stuff was sort of just starting to happen, you know, this stuff being like screamy hardcore. And and it wasn't until later when I went back and I like sort of like, you know, dug into The Cost tracks and stuff that I was like, one of these records was on Lookout. Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
How did it come to where Lookout released a screamy hardcore record?
You know, like looking at it in retrospect, it seems odd even to me.
Uh-huh.
But when it was happening, it made perfect sense because when I first got introduced to Lookout, they were putting out stuff by bands like Filth, or, you know, it was, we wouldn't have been considered an outlier in early days of Lookout. And I think as the bigger names that were on Lookout, Green Day and Rancid being like the two biggest noteworthy names.
Mm-hmm.
But as that kind of rose into infamy, people kind of just reflect upon Lookout with those bigger names in mind. But Lookout, when it started, was always sort of a "this is what's happening in Northern California" thing, and then branched out. And so to us, our friends in American Steel had been on the same record label that we put out our first records on that, on New Disorder, which was a record label that was run out of San Francisco. And it just made perfect sense that as American Steel was shopping for a new label, that they would just take us along. And the rhythm guitarist for American Steel is the one who engineered it. So we were just kind of all hanging out one day, and Ryan was like, "You should just be on Lookout. Like, you should just join us on Lookout."
Wait, because was Rogue's March on Lookout?
Rogue's March was on Lookout. Yeah.
That's so. That is like a fucking. That is like a desert island record for me, and like it totally. Until you said that, I was like, that is on fucking Lookout, isn't it? That's so wild.
Yeah.
Like
that record, it's really, really hard for me to listen to that record. It's got absolute bops on it, but like I was living with Ryan around that time that they were writing that record.
Mm-hmm.
And that record was recorded while he was going through chemotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So like I kind of look at it from this lens of like, you know, 18, 19-year-old me, like about to lose his friend, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's there are songs on there that like I will take me back to just very like, and also just like dark places of being, you know, scared and confused 18, 19-year-old. But yeah, I'm glad that they, you know, I want to say they're back now. They've been back for longer than they were broken up for, but they've been back, and the stuff that they're putting out is like, you know, light years ahead of what a lot of the stuff that they initially put out. But that record is it's still especially as the album goes on, can be a dark listen for me. I think I still have an LP copy of that record that I've never even cracked open. It's on Lookout.
I like to say that I was going through like some not like that, obviously, but like I like that record got me through some shit too. And like it's the like I only kind of knew the situation like around like the band while that record was being made. Like I didn't know how severe it was, but like it cuts through, like that record just cuts through the bullshit, like, and is just like it's got that feeling like it's like you need to listen to this because it's so important, like. And I don't know, like there's lots of good records, but I don't know that there's that many records that have that same urgency to it.
Yeah.
That one gives me, and where it's just like, this is the most important thing that we've ever sang, or whatever. In every single song, it's just like so like gut wrenching. But
yeah, it's an intense listen.
But he recorded the Chimera LP.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he recorded that. We recorded that at Sharkbite Studios. He was an engineer over there. He's since bought that entire studio.
Oh, that's awesome.
But at the time, it was owned and operated by, I think, Mark, whoever the drummer of the Beach Boys is. I think his name is Mark.
Oh, wow.
It was recorded at his spot. And I remember at one point him coming over and listening to playback on something and was like, "Oh, hold on, I've got the perfect snare for you." And we had no idea who this guy was. He was just some older dude that showed up,
Yeah.
to the room, to the booth, and came running back with a snare and was like, "This is the snare. It's this snare. You need this," and like, so we set it up and recorded with that snare. And after he left, Ryan was like, "That's the drummer of the Beach Boys just gave you a snare." Yeah.
And it was
because
the snare though. Like the drummer took it and was like, "Wait, this actually is sick and would sound great."
We did use it.
Yeah.
So on that recording, thanks, Mark. I think that's his name.
So he had like, this is probably the first time well, maybe not, because he did that studio. Maybe it wasn't the first time he ever heard anything like that. But it's funny that he was just instantly like, "Wait, like I actually know the vibe that you're going for." Yeah.
He was like, no, you want the snare,
That's wild.
I can't really remember like any sort of sonic difference, but
Yeah, I mean,
it made our drummer happy.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean,
that record, the console that was used for that too, it just got decommissioned. But the console was the same console that was used for Pink Floyd's The Wall.
No shit.
And it had a pull-out mirror under the console because I'm guessing that the members of Pink Floyd used it to chop up line drugs.
Yeah. And what was this mirror for?
What's this mirror for? Yeah. I remember pulling it out and then getting the story of like why that mirror was installed.
Yeah.
It was custom built for The Wall.
Checking your eyeliner.
Yeah. I guess not. No.
Yeah.
We recorded that at and we did it in like after hours. So to get a better rate,
sure.
We'd get off work and then, track until 2 or 3 in the morning. So it happened over several months. I remember at one point Ryan just exhausted from the shenanigans of us recording with 24 tracks, being like, "Okay, great. So I've got a dedicated track to bass feedback, and now I'm putting in another dedicated track to whispering." Just being like completely over our shenanigans, being like, I'm not trying to fucking record pet sounds here, you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun one. We just discovered the reel for that, the 2-inch tape for that. And there are like 3 songs on it that never saw the light of day. That I'd love to get access to. But one of them was the one that we used for the compilation. Because it was recorded. It was meant to be a recording for a split with us, Dead and Gone, and Black Cat Music, which just never happened. The label that it was supposed to be out on went defunct, and we recorded intentionally. Like we left things going at the end of that song with like a minute of noise, just so that we could be the band that had the full B side.
and it didn't happen.
Yeah. And it didn't happen. Yeah.
Bandcamp says that's the sophomore LP, and you mentioned another LP that was on. What was the name of the label again?
New Disorder.
Right, New Disorder. But that's not on your Bandcamp.
It should be.
Or is that just like the one that's called EP?
I think that's the one that's just called EP.
Oh, okay.
I think it's like 7 songs.
Yeah, I mean,
by today's standards, it would be considered an LP.
Yeah, exactly. It was different then, like. Yeah. And then Loma Prieta happened or whatever, and then it's like, our LP is your EP, and they made like a 12-minute LP. So like, yeah, now it's just like, well, you put, 20 minutes roughly, or 11 songs. Yeah, that's an LP. Yeah, that. First of all, that LP is incredible. I think that like there are a lot of bands from back then that are really good, and there a lot of times people know like what, like, oh yeah, there's this band, and I honestly would put the Chimera LP up there with like some of the best of that era, and I hope that anybody that's listening that has not checked that out goes to y'all's Bandcamp and just goes through y'all's stuff. One other thing that I'll say about the cost, which is this is weird for me, but just in a anecdotal way, is that y'all had a split with the DBS, which is like, okay, I was in this band called Keiki Obati around that same time that the cost was coming out, and our drummer was like really into like bands that were on Lookout at that time, like Squirt Gun and like just pop punk bands,
Mm-hmm.
But he was just like a local drummer and a friend, and I was like, yeah, I'm looking for a drummer, but it's not stuff that you do. And he's just like, well, I just like to play drums, so like, show me some songs. And so he was in our Screamo band, and he was like, this reminds me of this band called the DBS. And like, I never heard of them. He gave me a CD. I was like, this is cool. And then like, it wasn't actually until today when I was going through y'all's Bandcamp, I was like, no fucking way. Like, y'all had that split with the DBS, and there's this like weird, like, I hadn't heard of them at the time, but like you're across, the country and did not know each other. like this weird, like 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon thing with our bands, like at that
Right.
point, Were they from around y'all, or did y'all just like link up with them at some?
They were from Vancouver, BC.
Oh, okay.
And we first played with them at Gilman. They weren't on the show officially. They were just in town. They had a day off, and it was a show with us, AFI, and Anti-Flag, and Ida. Which is
Ida.
Yeah, which like this was literally like 31 years ago. By today's standard, that show would be, well, Anti-Flag by today's standard wouldn't be on that show.
Right.
But even without
gotcha.
But DBS had done a split with Anti-Flag that had come out a few months before. And so they were like, oh, like we'll just come to this show and hang out with our friends Anti-Flag.
Mm-hmm.
And right before AFI went on, AFI kind of goaded them into just doing their set with AFI's equipment. So it ended up being a 6-band show. The Wobblies were the ones who opened. And we hung out with them after the show. And then the next day, our friend and roadie, Sita, was like, DBS spent the night at my house. If you all want to like come hang out, like I'm making pancakes. So we hung out with them and really hit it off with them. And I sent them a letter. They gave me their 7-inch, and I sent them a letter like saying, hey, we want to cross the border. Can you help facilitate that? And we can play some shows with you. They got it when they got home from that tour. And then we figured it out. Like basically like we went in, we were pretending to record.
Yeah.
So we like, that old
That's
thing.
What you
we're
had
just
to do,
going up to Vancouver to record a record and give you money.
Yeah.
But they hadn't played shows in like locally in like 3 months, and it was the mid '90s. So we played like 2 really stellar shows with them on Vancouver Island and then in Vancouver proper. And that kind of born the friendship with them. So we would do shows with them all across the West Coast. And then, anytime it was both bands playing together, it was always a really big deal.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, they're still making music.
I did not know that. I'll have to like try to, go down that wormhole after we get off here. But yeah, because
if you like kind of like sasscore stuff.
It's more along that lines now, huh?
3 out of 4 of them were in the Red Light Sting.
Oh, okay.
If you're familiar with the Red Light Sting.
I'm
if
not,
not, get familiar with the Red Light Sting because they're really fun.
Cool. Yeah. Obviously, we're going to talk about middle-aged queers here in a bit, but before we go there, since we're talking about like screamo stuff and everything, you did a project like sort of the beginning of like the lockdowns and everything like that called Agonist Party, and I know that the members of that band had like just a really wild pedigree. Who is in that band and what did they do?
Oh, okay. So I'll start off by saying Middle Age Queers was started by members of the Cost and Yaphet Kotto and Fang.
Okay.
Was sort of the springboard for it, because none of us had been in queercore bands. None of us had played queercore, but all of us identified as queer.
Mm-hmm.
Middle-aged queers during the pandemic came to an abrupt stop, like everyone did.
Mm-hmm.
But even once like safety protocols became normal, like wearing N95 masks and having like some sort of air cleansing stuff became options. Middle-aged queers did not practice because our drummer's dad was very immunocompromised.
Mm-hmm.
So Mag and I were like, well, we can still work on like writing middle-aged queer songs. But we found that neither of us were really writing songs that would have worked for middle-aged queers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because at least locally people were like, oh, it's Sean from The Cost and Mag from Yaphet Kotto. Like, this is going to sound like this. And they expected a certain sound sonically. And what we gave them was middle-aged queers. So we were like, let's write the record that people would have expected from us.
Okay.
And we'll do it as like a 3-song EP. And by the time we're done writing that and recording that, surely this whole pandemic thing will be over.
Right.
We ended up writing like 13 or 14 songs. And then we tried tracking it ourselves. We brought in, initially it was just going to be Mag and I playing everything. And then we brought in Dave. Dave plays in Dollar Store, which is Jeff Ott's new band.
Okay.
So we brought in Dave to play second guitar. And then Chris came in. And he was playing drums. And he played drums briefly for Battalion of Saints. I'm not exactly sure if he ever recorded anything with them. But old school San Diego drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And for the life of us, we could not get any sort of recordings that we were happy with. So we ended up convincing Tim Green over at Louder Studios, and he did like all the early Bratmobile stuff. He's done a gazillion things for the Melvins. We convinced him that we would be incredibly good and not go anywhere or do anything for like weeks beforehand. And then we went up to his place in Grass Valley, recorded there, and then and left. But yeah, he also was under like very heightened COVID protocols. So that whole thing was miraculously eked out during like, you know, the worst of COVID.
Yeah.
With us being, you know, we were coming in with like N95 respirators and goggles on to rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
Kept it as safe as possible. And then we played one show because it was still COVID restrictions. And we played that outdoors on a beach to maybe like 20 people. And then just disbanded because real shows were starting to happen again.
Yeah. But you said 13 or 14 songs, and you did say in a message to me, you were like, looks like we're going to do 14 songs, but there's only 8 songs on the LP. What's the story there? Just didn't have time for all of them, or?
I think there were a lot of them that they just didn't end up, like the 5 or 6 ones that either didn't get recorded or the recordings just, they weren't exactly what we had envisioned.
Mm-hmm.
And so we left them off of there. You know, we may later down the line throw them out there for fun, but those eight were kind of picked as the, like, these are the ones that best encapsulate what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird record because all of us write very differently. And so it already was feeling like sonically like a bit of a mismatch. Little odds and ends in the record. The ones that didn't make it were just like these huge outliers.
Huh. That's really interesting to me because I feel like already there's like a lot happening, and that like it feels deliberate in a way, like that's like, hey, let's sort of, like, we have like a core thing that people can latch on to, but we're gonna come at people from a lot of different angles. And like, I feel like when you say outliers, I'm like, wait, was there even more to this like 360 worldview of an album that like, you know, like what would have been an outlier on this album? You know, like there was a ska
There,
song, or you know, I don't.
there was like an 8-minute instrumental that sounded a lot like Slint.
Oh yeah,
And I think that drove people nuts, that it sounded so much like Slint.
yeah,
That it almost felt like it was like intentionally referencing them too much.
huh?
And that one had a sample over it that was great, but it was also like, yeah, if we want to fit this one song on, we might have to take off another one, like how to configure it onto a record, because
Right. Yeah,
it was just too long.
yeah. 8 minutes as an instrumental is like, and the rest of the songs are a couple minutes or whatever. Like, what do you know? It. I don't. Yeah, it's almost this like, if it goes in the middle, then you worry like, do you lose people? You know, if it goes at the end, like, do people just sort of tune out? You know, like
Mm-hmm.
it's a I'm I'm like a bit weird as far as like, you know, some of my like favorite tracks by bands, like when, like if somebody was like, what's your favorite Black Sabbath song, I'd be like, Lonely Is the Word, and people would be like, what?
Right.
Because, you know, so it's like, me personally, like that 8 minute song might be like the game changer for me. I might hear that one and be like, holy shit, like that's the one, that's my favorite song of theirs. But like, yeah, just in general, like that is a weird, like, it's like
Yeah, there
if it
was
was
also part of me that was like, if this is going to happen, like maybe it just needs to be like
its
on
own
a single
thing.
side of a 10-inch.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
it felt like it would be trying to like maybe push too much into another record, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like then it would kind of diminish its power, and then the other songs around it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So it almost felt like it would be a disservice to the song and the other songs by including it. It gets to be kind of weird when you're not writing 2-minute bops, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you start
Yeah,
to you start to care about them a little bit more. And
yeah.
you know, like I never, on that particular song, like the bass line in the intro that goes on for a really long time, like I felt bummed that it didn't make it, because I was like, it's so cool. I'm playing, like, I never repeat a bass line for like the first 3 minutes. But you know, only someone who's nerding out on bass line would be like, that's cool. He never repeats that, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, no, I would totally pick up on that. That'd be, yeah. And as like the person who did the legwork on that, you got to be like, in to a degree where it's just like, I I want people to get the chance to like appreciate that, because I worked really hard on it. You know,
Yeah.
like you didn't just like do the same thing like 32 times or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Which is like,
The older that I get too, like I remember when the Cost was working on the follow-up record and then we broke up. I remember just being like, oh man, but I've written some really cool stuff and people aren't going to get to hear it.
mm-hmm.
And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, there's so much music out there. Like I know that I fucking nailed it on that bass line.
Right.
You know, like I'll be able to do something similar again.
Yeah. Also, at
Yeah.
the same time, we're in a different world now where it's like, you no longer have, even for a second, that people won't have the opportunity to hear it. Whether you can get people to listen to it is another story, but like the opportunity for someone to hear it is always there, you know?
Yeah, I
So,
had this weird thing this morning where I was checking over the stats of the new Middle Age Queers record,
mhm.
um,
Which is
like
like brand new.
which is brand new,
Yeah.
and being like, oh wow, so 1,700 people have listened to the new Middle Age Queers album on like one streaming platform, and I was like, I would have been like fucking stoked to sell 500 copies of a record.
Mm-hmm.
And then just be like, well, that record's done. You know, like that's how it used to be. Like, oh, well, now, like with the exception of people copying it for their friends.
Yeah.
That's the number of people who are going to hear that. And now just being like, oh, like that's more than I would have pressed even in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, like it's very, very weird.
Yeah. I mean, I did do a split 7-inch when I was like, I don't know, barely 18, that did 1,000 copies and like sold all of them. And like, that's now it's like you do 300 of something, or I mean, in my case, you know, I'm not, you know, speaking for everyone. Like obviously there are screamo bands that will sell way more than that. But if I do 300 of something and I sell out of it, I'm like, cool. But like, yeah, fresh out of high school, and it's just like, I had like a $150 van, and I'm like going on tours and stuff and selling like shitloads of records and like for $2, you know. But like,
we were playing a show in Bakersfield, which is a town about 3 hours south of here. That is, it's not quite LA, and it's definitely not the Bay Area, and it's definitely just its own little world. But it was wild to me how CDs are like retro cool with the kids.
Yeah.
So we sold more CDs that night than we did LPs, just because it's, you know, it was an all ages show. And we were trying to figure it out, and we asked somebody like, hey, you've got a CD player? And they were like, in my car. And I was like, oh shit, kids are now getting their parents' cars to drive, and they don't have the ability to stream stuff on their parents' old cars. So CDs are now like seeing this resurgence.
Yeah.
From like teenagers.
Yeah.
It's time is a flat circle.
It's weird too, because like there's even, I mean, like my wife bought a new like car a couple years ago from an older woman, like, you know, a woman who was like basically like, I'm retired now, I don't need this car anymore. It has a CD player in it, and it also has like all the stuff where, you know, hook up your Bluetooth and all this other stuff. And the funny thing is, like, this, I didn't even know it had a CD player forever, because it's like when you, in the older cars, it's like when there was a CD player in it, like you fucking knew there was a CD player in it, because it was this huge chunk of plastic in the middle of the dash, you know, with like the velvet lips, you know, that you could see where you put the CD in. And now it's just like the thinnest like crevice, you know,
tiny little slot.
Yeah. And that could have just been like a break in the plastic, like,
right,
you know. And it's like, you know, one day I was getting ready to go play this festival in Toronto, and I'm like, basically I'm like saying to my wife, I'm like, I sure hope I don't have trouble, you know, hooking my phone up to the Bluetooth for this trip, because like I've just was having weird trouble for some reason. And she's like, well, there is a CD player. I'm like, what? Driving this thing for like 3 months, you know. But yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, between that and the big jeans and, you know, everything, like, yeah, we're seeing, you know, all kinds of stuff from, like, it's, I don't know, like we're talking about, like, when we were doing some of these records, it was like, this was when punks could finally afford to do CDs. Like it used to be like we would do records because we would do these records for super cheap, and if you wanted to do a CD, CDs were fucking expensive to make. Now it's like quite the opposite, you know. So like now is the time to do a CD, you know. Like if they're popular again and they're still super cheap to make, like, yeah, do it. Like, awesome.
Fight through the window, back loud.
the album that just came out, that is Theater of Shame, and that came out on April 9th. And that's y'all's third LP?
That's our third LP.
Right. And so we've got Too Fag for Love, which came out in 2020. Shout at the Hetero, which came out in October of 2022. And then Theater of Shame. And, like, I know that, like, you are a huge fan of one Motley Crue album in particular. But I didn't know that 5 years down the line, y'all were going to be parodying the titles off of every Motley Crue album. So, is that just fun, or is there just once the first one you were like, we got to keep doing this? Like, what's the full story there?
The full story is we meant to record the first record. The first record, we were like, we had some friends that we hadn't approached yet that we were sort of like, I just want to do like a series of splits with them. So we were going to record like primarily just so that we could like submit to play at a few places. Like, and just for posterity. We didn't really know how long we were going to be doing this. And so it was like, oh, this is a thing that we've been doing. It's been fun. Like, we should get recordings of it. Maybe put out some splits with some friends and, you know, whatever. And when we were listening to it, after everything had been mixed, our bassist was like, Josh was like, we need to just put this out all as one thing. Like, these are the songs. It's documenting, like, what we did this first year. Like, I just think it should be, I don't think we should break them up. And we chatted about doing it as a cassette, like a demo cassette, and just having it be like, you know, a couple copies for friends. And then someone brought up that Motley Crue never thought that their first record was going to be anything more than a demo.
I'm losing you a little bit.
What's that?
I'm losing you a little bit.
Oh.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I got most of that, but you were talking about Motley Crue.
Oh, just that Motley Crue's first album was supposed to be their demo.
Right.
They were just going in to record a demo tape.
Okay.
And they thought it turned out decent enough to press vinyl.
Okay.
And so just from out of nowhere, I was like, well, I've put out records before. I know how to do that. Our friend Jesse works at a pressing plant. We could make this happen. So I jokingly said, like, instead of Too Fast for Love, it'll be our Too Fag for Love. And once I said that, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
Everybody's eyes lit up, and people were like, and it can have your crotch on the cover. And you can wear, like, jorts instead of leather pants. And so it just got brainstormed right there, like, at the coffee table at the recording studio. And our friend Andy, who runs Sell the Heart Records, jumped at it because he had seen us play a few months before. And I've known Andy for ages. He's a Northern California kid. He's also the guitarist for Tsunami Bomb. He's been in some pretty awesome bands as well, like California Redemption. So Andy was like, I'm resurrecting my record label, and I'll have you guys be the first thing I put out now that I'm bringing the record label back. And then when we put out the second record, Adam from Say 10 Records was like, you're going to keep the Motley Crue thing, right? Like, you're going to do a follow-up, and it's going to be Motley Crue. And I was like, well, the second album is called Shout at the Devil. We could make it Shout at the Hetero. And so, you know, once we were on album 2 with it, I guess we're committed to the bit.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they'll ever get wind of it. Like, if anyone's going to show them, like, a picture of the first album with my crotch on it or whatever. Like, I'm wondering if we'll get a cease and desist letter, or at least some sort of recognition that there's a bunch of queer punks in Northern California taking the piss out of them.
I wonder, you know, parody is a pretty protected, like, yeah.
It doesn't stop the cease and desist letters from
No, it doesn't, but there's, when it comes to Yeah, when it comes to parody, that's way more protected than like if it was just like an homage or something,
Yeah.
like parody has this other like layer of protection where it's just, I don't know, where if it was just like this was similar but not parody, like they could probably easily shoot that down. But yeah, I don't know, hard to say.
Dominic got pretty fucking close with Dominic from the bassist of Tsunami Bomb. Does some ridiculously cool illustrations. And we tapped him to do the cover, and he picks almost like pixel perfect. He added some embellishments. The cover is gosh, I'm forgetting her name. The transformer athlete, who's a big Republican.
Oh, Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the masks are Caitlyn Jenner is the tragedy, and Scott Wiener is the comedy. Scott Wiener is a California Democratic Party. He's one of our assembly members.
oh, okay. So the masks were based on real people.
Yeah, are based on the two of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was just, yeah. I mean, that makes sense that there'd be like more behind it, but I just thought it was just like, oh, okay, these are the the mask archetype of the,
Yeah.
and
But beyond the changes to the facial features to represent Jenner and Wiener, it's pretty much pixel perfect recreation of the original Theater of Pain artwork.
for sure.
But we'll see if they come for us.
Yeah, I mean,
I doubt it. We pressed 500 copies of that thing. It's small potatoes.
yeah, they'd be gone. Like if they put that kind of heat on you, they'd be gone before anybody could even say stop. Like if they gave it that kind of traction, people would just sell it out immediately, and then
Exactly.
It'd be like, well, they're all gone. You're right. We're done.
Yep.
But
won't be putting that out again.
yeah, not like that. Yeah, it's like I want, like, what would you say are y'all's like biggest influences for middle-aged queers? Like I know the bands that that come to mind when I hear it, but like I want you to use your own words, because like I don't necessarily some of the bands, it's like oh yeah, this reminds me of this, but like I don't want to like give certain people like the breath.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I got really, I should say that like I got super into playing a certain type of hardcore for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the most well-known thing coming out of my brain, sort of crystallized in what I did in the cost.
Mm-hmm.
But as I got older, I had more fun just like doing sloppy mid-tempo punk rock.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like there was sort of a bigger well to draw from, and like a more expansive space for me in it. FYP is probably like the number one primary influence.
Oh yeah.
And like I don't even realize it. I think with this, now that this next record is out, I'm definitely like more aware of it. But like it took me several months after we tracked everything for one song in particular of me being like, oh, that's a fucking FYP song. Like I just rearranged a bunch of riffs and made it a song. So that's a big one. I think Blats is another obvious one. When we played punk rock bowling for the first time, somebody came up afterwards and was like, you guys are like gay Blats. which was hilarious to me because so many of the members of Blatz are gay. It's like redundant.
You, yeah.
Yeah, those two are probably the biggest. Black Fork, who was also on Lookout, they were another like unsung weird oddity in retrospect when you look back at Lookout's catalog. Black Fork was a hardcore band, like hardcore punk band from the Bay Area. We certainly don't hit nearly as fast as like beats per minute as they were going.
Mm-hmm.
The drummer of Black Fork went on to play in Talk Like Poison or Talk Is Poison.
Oh, okay.
And he also went on to play in Smokers, which is another pretty awesome Bay Area band. But just as far as like, you know, tones and snottiness, definitely pull from Black Fork as well. We get compared often to like some of the earlier West Coast punk bands, and I don't necessarily really hear it. Like we'll get Agent Orange or Adolescence, and I don't necessarily like, just that doesn't really ring true to me as much as like a lot of more localized Northern California stuff does.
Yeah, I mean, I could see those being sort of thrown in the blender with stuff like FYP, because FYP wouldn't have come to me right away either, but you say so, and now I'm like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You know, but like, it's the same thing with Adolescence or whatever. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't get that, like, just like, oh, that's what I heard. But like, when you say it, it's like, yeah, okay, I could see that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, but, yeah, it's, so, I mean, you said that doing this, like, you could draw from a bigger well. I'm not sure if those are your exact words, but that was like the basic, you know, idea, and
Mm-hmm.
that it's like fun. And I think that lyrically you get that impression as well, that it's like a lot of fun, and that also, like, you know, when you do screamo or hardcore or whatever, you know, you sort of, a lot of times it's like, you're like, we've got this sort of area over here about things that we typically write songs about, you know, like fuck the government and like injustices and stuff like that, and like, you know, personal despair and et cetera, right? But I'm thinking that's what you meant as well, like because lyrically y'all's songs are all over the place, and it's a lot of fun from that aspect as well. Like, I mean, it's like there's songs about pajama parties. There's like, you know, gay songs about eating hot dogs. You know, there's lots of euphemisms there, of course. Songs about anal beads. You know, songs about, and then, you know, you also you don't like, and of course I personally, and like, I'm not trying to speak for any community or anything, but I think that a song about anal beads is political. Like, that's just,
Certainly. Yeah.
that's just me. So I'm not saying anything about, you know, the messages in any other songs being not political, but like, then there's like, y'all have like these weird, not weird as in like it's done weird or whatever, but it's like the poignance of a song like, is it called, this song is sponsored by Absolute Vodka? Is that the title? Okay. I knew it was Absolute Vodka. I thought that was the title, but where it's like, you're talking about like how, like, and you know, I've only heard a handful of bands sort of come across this thing in song before, but it's like, you're talking about like how even the things that like we make to be joyful and stuff are becoming like commoditized and stuff, and like,
Yeah.
and that has this really like, whereas like this song is obviously just a lot of fun, you know, and it's about a pajama party and pizza and like, you know, and then this song, and then all of a sudden you're like slapped in the face with this, cutting like bite at capitalism and stuff. And like I don't know, there's not really a question there as much as like it's a compliment about like, you know, you said you've got this well to draw from, and you didn't just like stay in the shallow end of that pool or whatever. You really like went out. Was any of this like a conscious decision, or is just like, look, like I'm just gonna write about whatever I want, the first thing that comes to mind, like let's go for it, let's have fun? Or is it just like, are you trying to move the pieces on the boards like as far apart as you can?
Well, I think for me personally, it's that I've always had better luck being like, I'm going to meet you here at this place of humor and neutrality as like an icebreaker. And then I'm going to introduce some serious topics along the way now that like I've got you engaged. So like this song is sponsored by Absolute Vodka. If you've ever attended a Pride event, like that's funny because like fucking everything at a gay pride parade is sponsored by somebody. Like whether it's the dance stage or like, you know, the grand official or whoever they're honoring, like that title is going to be sponsored. So you there definitely has for decades been this sort of like, okay, well, it's Pride's rolling around the corner, and if you're a major city, like these are the sponsors you're going to expect to see. And the timing of that song is ridiculous because we're seeing so many of those folks pull out their sponsorship. And so, you know, it from the get-go felt like fair weather friends, you know, and I made sure to include a jab at Apple because I was marching that year with a group called Gay Shame. Gay Shame is very stylized off of what ACT UP was doing in the 80s. But Gay Shame and the AIDS Housing Alliance walked down the streets of San Francisco holding a sign saying eviction equals death, because the amount of displacement in the Bay Area was really, really high. And we were a small community booth that like you saw in the blink of an eye. Apple was a sponsoring marcher, and they took up 2 city blocks with people wearing Apple t-shirts. And like people were burnt out. People were burnt out at seeing that many fucking Apple employees. It became this big thing of like, okay, so like, how come community nonprofit groups that actually like do stuff within the community were very underfunded, yet like a blink of an eye, and Apple can come in and take up this much real estate.
I seem to be losing you again.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
I'm getting a lot of like background noise on your end too.
Yeah, well, the background noise is not a problem with the connection. That's my actual computer fan is bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, so
you were saying like that, you know, Apple had just like 2 blocks of employees' shirts and everything, and you're saying like, how can we have any kind of visibility as this small nonprofit group when there's that going on?
Right. Yeah. And Apple has stopped doing anything related to anything, pride-wise. And, you know, there's always this sort of argument of like, well, they pay for things. And like, yes, they kind of pay for themselves in the footprint that they've made, you know? This whole thing could be more community-oriented, and we wouldn't have to have, you know, 40 more porta potties, because the straight Apple employees wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's always like, it's never just like they paid for it and so it's called this and now stay out of the way either. It's always just like, if we do this, like we get to have 300 people there that have nothing to do with this, like wearing our advertising,
Right.
and it's like, yeah, it's nobody. It's not like people were fooled. It's not like anybody ever thought that they were some like, this some kind of like honest benefactor to any of these events. Not like
No,
that, but it's like just
it's an event that 500,000 people are going to show up to and see a logo on repeat.
right,
you know?
right, right. But yeah, hopefully there is no cease and desist coming. Hopefully, if anything, if the members of Motley Crue are listening, of course they are. They listen to every episode. Who am I kidding? They're glued.
Motley loves the Scrams.
Yeah, they are glued to their podcasts right now.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, there's no cease and desist. They'll just ask y'all to do like a co-headliner tour with them or something at the whatever like summer town.
Summer Jam.
Yeah. So whatever corn festivals they're currently touring, I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure what Motley Crue's status in the rock world is anymore.
Yeah, I kind of would figure they're doing like cruises and stuff at this point.
Yeah, right. It's like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Tommy, I'll send you our backing tracks.
But like, I hope people go and check out the album. It it sounds like people are already like sort of surpassing y'all's expectations as far as like it's only just been out like 8 days at this point, But are you do you have some shows lined up and stuff to support that like coming up or?
Yeah, we're gonna do a Pacific Northwest trek in May. So we're gonna be hitting up Chico, Salem, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Astoria, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. The Seattle show is going to be bonkers. We're playing at Vera, but we're playing at the Vera's Black Lodge, which is the smaller venue. It's going to be 90-pound Wuss's first show in Seattle in like 26 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's at 150 cap room.
Oh, wow.
I expect that's going to sell out if it hasn't already.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot with them. Those folks were. I didn't even realize that they were a tooth and nail band until like way later. They just kind of got rolled into like all the hardcore and like scream hardcore that was happening in the Bay Area at the time because they were like just from up the coast. But when they reunited, they pulled us in to do some stuff. I went out to Furnace Festival, which I also didn't realize was like a quasi-Christian festival.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's run by one of the guys who did Cornerstone.
Oh.
Which blew my mind, but I flew out there and did guest vocals on a bunch of 90-pound Wuss songs when they played last year.
That's awesome. I remember seeing that you were like there. I didn't know I didn't make that connection.
Yeah. So I'm stoked for them. They're our label mates now, which is also bizarre. So we're gonna kind of we're definitely gonna sell out the Black Lodge. But always stoked to do something with them. No East Coast this year. We did 2 trips to the East Coast last year, and everyone's tired. I have a kid that's on the way, so
yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it only took like 4 grown-ups to make a baby.
Well,
queer parenting is weird.
Yeah, I my wife works in labor and delivery, and last night she was talking about how there were 2 different women on the floor who were talking about having the same baby daddy. So sometimes it takes less to make more children, and sometimes it takes more to make less children. So, it's not It's not a 1-for-1 always, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Despite what we might have been raised to believe, which is fine.
Yeah. No, I'm all about it.
Yeah. But yeah, that congratulations on that, and I hope that, your other shows, other than the one that's guaranteed to sell out, also do well. But yeah, it's been real nice to chat with you. I feel like we could sit here and just sort of tell stories, but I try to keep these down to around an hour.
Fair enough.
Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about before we take off, or?
Yeah, shit's getting kind of scary out there.
Yeah.
And like, while folks are here, and before the folks who can, and no shame, no anything about it if you're going to bail, but like, make sure that the folks that need the help get the help before you peace out. That's been weighing on my mind a lot lately. Yeah, we're still a community. So, do the proactive thing of checking in on folks too. Because a lot of times, I know that from my own personal experience, that when stuff gets all crazy, I tend to shut down. So, yeah, stay close with each other. Keep your eyes open.
And that was my conversation with Shauners. Thank you so much, Shauners, for taking the time to chat with me. I had a blast finally actually getting to talk to you after all this time. I hope you all had a great time listening as well. Until next time, take care and do good things.